When a small American town starts dying, most people assume that is the end of the story. The young leave first, then the businesses close, and the for sale signs multiply in the front yards and nobody comes to pull them down. But in at least 10 towns across the United States, something else happened entirely. Jewish families moved in, quietly, often without any national attention at all. Towns where property values have risen by 300%. Towns where the population doubled in a single decade. Towns where the school system went from near closure to overflowing. Towns where dozens of new businesses opened on streets that had been dark for years. These are 10 dying American towns that Jewish families quietly turned into paradise. Now let us begin. Number 10. We start in the deep south of the United States, Dothan, Alabama. Population roughly 71,000 in the wider metro area, known locally as the peanut capital of the world. Cotton fields and Baptist churches stretch in every direction. Dothan has had a Jewish presence since the 1880s. Temple Emmanuel was established in 1929. For decades, it served a small but steady congregation. By the early 2000s, that congregation had dwindled to around 50 families. The members were aging. Without intervention, the community faced extinction within a generation. Then in 2007, a local businessman named Larry Bloomberg helped launch something unprecedented. The Bloomberg Family Jewish Community Services began offering Jewish families up to $50,000 each to relocate to Dothan. The only requirement was a commitment to stay for at least 5 years and participate in Jewish communal life. By 2015, an estimated 200 new Jewish residents had moved to Dothan from across the country. Families arrived from New York, California, Illinois, and Florida. Temple Emmanuel's membership stabilized. The program attracted national media attention, including coverage in the New York Times. This is the only known case in modern American history where a Jewish community paid families to move to a town in the Deep South. Alabama has a total Jewish population estimated at under 10,000, and yet here in Dothan, a congregation on the verge of disappearing found a way to survive. A town that paid Jewish families $50,000 each to move there is a story most people have never heard. But travel north to the coast of New Jersey and you will find a town that tried something even more radical over a century earlier. Number 9. Woodbine, New Jersey, Cape May County, a tiny borough surrounded by farmland and pine forest. Population roughly 2,400, about 45 minutes from Atlantic City. In the 1880s, this was essentially empty land. In 1891, the Baron de Hirsch Fund purchased several thousand acres here. Eastern European Jewish immigrants fleeing pogroms in the Russian Empire would be resettled not in the crowded tenements of Lower Manhattan, but on farmland in southern New Jersey. The colony was designed from scratch. Farms, factories, schools, civic institutions. By 1895, Woodbine had a garment factory, a hat-making operation, and productive agricultural plots. The Baron de Hirsch Fund invested over $1 million in 19th century terms. At its peak, the colony supported over 2,000 residents. In 1903, Woodbine became the first all-Jewish self-governing municipality in the United States. The Woodbine Brotherhood Synagogue, built in 1896, still stands. It is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The founders believed they could disprove the stereotype that Jewish people were unsuited to farming. For a time, they did. The colony eventually declined as younger generations moved to cities, but the experiment remains one of the most remarkable chapters in American Jewish history. Almost nobody knows it ever existed. A Jewish farming colony in the woods of New Jersey is a chapter of history most people have never encountered. But head north into the Catskill Mountains and you will find an entire corridor of towns that were transformed not once but twice. Number 8. Sullivan County, New York, roughly 90 miles northwest of New York City, the heart of what was once known as the Borscht Belt. From the 1920s through the 1960s, the Catskills were the summer playground of Jewish New York. Grossingers, the Concord, Kutschers, Comedians like Jerry Lewis, Mel Brooks, and Joan Rivers launched their careers on these stages. Then the resorts closed. One by one through the 1980s and the 1990s, the grand hotels shut their doors. Air conditioning and cheap air travel to Florida made the Catskills feel outdated. Sullivan County lost population. Property values collapsed. Towns like South Fallsburg, Liberty, and Monticello hollowed out. Main streets went dark. Beginning in the late 1990s, Hasidic and Orthodox Jewish families began purchasing properties across the county. Abandoned bungalow colonies were renovated. Former resort land was subdivided for year-round housing. New yeshivas opened. Kosher grocery stores appeared on streets that had been empty for a decade. Sullivan County's population grew by roughly 8% between 2010 and 2020. Property values in parts of the county rose by over 100% in the same period. The Catskills died as a Jewish resort destination and were reborn as a Jewish residential community. The same mountains, the same roads, an entirely different chapter. Number 7. Kasser, New York. A resort corridor that collapsed and was rebuilt by the descendants of the very community that once holidayed there is a remarkable cycle. But drive south into Rockland County and you will find a village so small and so singular that its very existence is difficult to believe. One of the smallest villages in the entire state. Population approximately 5,400. It sits within the town of Ramapo in Rockland County, about 30 miles northwest of Midtown Manhattan. Kaiser was incorporated as a village in 1990. It is almost entirely populated by Vizhnitz Hasidic Jews, followers of the Vizhnitzer Rebbe. The community traces its roots to the city of Vizhnitsia in what is now western Ukraine. The Vizhnitz dynasty was devastated during the Holocaust but survived through a handful of families who rebuilt in Israel and eventually in America. Over 90% of households in Kasser speak Yiddish at home. The median age is approximately 13 years old. Walk through Kasser on any weekday morning and the streets are full of children. Schoolyards overflow. Pushchairs line the pavements outside apartment buildings. This is a village where nearly every resident belongs to a single Hasidic dynasty. The rhythm of daily life is dictated entirely by religious observance. There is no comparable municipality anywhere in the Western world outside of Israel. A village of 5,000 where 90% speak Yiddish and the median age is 13 is already difficult to process, but the community next door is even larger, even more insular, and governed by a structure that exists nowhere else in the United States. Number 6. New Square, New York, also in Rockland County. About 30 miles north of Midtown Manhattan, population approximately 9,400 according to the 2020 census. New Square was founded in 1961 by Grand Rebbe Yaakov Yosef Twersky, a Holocaust survivor who led the Escavirer Hasidic dynasty. He and his followers left Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and chose this location in the countryside of Rockland County to build something entirely new. An intentional community guided by traditional religious values. The village was named after Skvira, the Ukrainian town where the dynasty originated. Over 95% of residents identify as Hasidic Jewish. Yiddish is the primary language in virtually every home. The village has its own fire department, ambulance service, and community governance. The birth rate is among the highest per capita in the nation. What sets New Square apart even from other Hasidic communities is the singular authority of the Grand Rebbe. Television and internet are restricted. There are no bars, no cinemas, no secular entertainment venues. The Rebbe's authority is spiritual, cultural, and to a significant extent practical. It extends to matters of education, employment, housing, and daily conduct. A village built by a Holocaust survivor. 9,000 people living under the spiritual authority of a single Rebbe, every one of them speaking Yiddish. It is a reality that challenges everything most British viewers think they know about modern America. Number 4. Postville, Iowa. Alamaki County, northeast corner of the state. Population roughly 2,000, surrounded by cornfields and dairy farms. The nearest city of any size is more than an hour away, but cross the country to the middle of Iowa and you will find a town whose Jewish transformation is perhaps the most unlikely of all. By the mid-1980s, Postville was a typical small Midwestern town in gentle decline. Young people leaving for Des Moines or Minneapolis, the kind of place where the closure of the hardware store would make the front page. In 1987, a Lubavitch Hasidic family named Rubashkin purchased a disused slaughterhouse on the edge of town. They opened Agri Processors, a glatt kosher meat packing plant. Within years, the plant became one of the largest kosher meat producers in the United States. Hasidic Jewish workers and their families moved to Postville. So did immigrant workers from Guatemala, Mexico, Somalia, and Palau. The town became one of the most ethnically diverse places in Iowa. At its peak, Agri Processors employed roughly 800 workers. The Jewish population grew from 0 to an estimated 150 families. A Shabbat synagogue, a mikveh, a kosher grocery store, and a Jewish day school were established. Property values rose. Empty houses filled. Then in May of 2008, federal immigration agents arrested 389 workers at the plant. It was the largest single-site immigration raid in American history at that time. The owner, Shalom Rubashkin, was convicted of financial fraud. The plant closed, but the Jewish community stayed. A new ownership group reopened the facility under the name Agri Star. Postville, against every expectation, survived. A Hasidic meatpacking empire in the cornfields of Iowa that survived the largest immigration raid in American history is a story that belongs in a novel. But return to the East Coast and you will encounter a hamlet with no official municipal status and more synagogues than most cities you have ever heard of. Number 4. Monsey, New York, an unincorporated hamlet within the town of Ramapo, Rockland County. About 30 miles northwest of Midtown Manhattan, it does not appear on most maps as a proper town or village. It has no mayor and no municipal government of its own. Monsey has over 100 synagogues. 41% of residents speak Yiddish at home. 100 synagogues, 4 in 10 people speaking Yiddish. In an American hamlet most people have never heard of. The community is predominantly Hasidic. Several courts and dynasties are represented. Adjacent to Monsey sit the villages of New Square and Kazar. Together they form a vast, interconnected network of ultra-Orthodox Jewish life. It has been expanding steadily since the 1970s. Property values in parts of Monsey have increased by over 200% since the year 2000. The growth has created friction with existing residents over housing development and zoning. These are real and sensitive matters, but the sheer scale of what exists here is staggering. An unincorporated hamlet with more Jewish institutional density than most major cities anywhere in the world. 100 synagogues in a hamlet where 4 in 10 people speak Yiddish is something most people struggle to believe. But the town a few miles to the north has been quietly growing into something no demographic model predicted. Number 3. South Fallsburg, New York, Sullivan County, sitting at the eastern edge of the old Borscht Belt corridor. This is a town that appeared earlier in our list as part of the broader Catskills story, but South Fallsburg deserves its own chapter. Because what happened here is not a resort story, it is a residential transformation. For decades, South Fallsburg was a seasonal town. It came alive in June and emptied by September. The grand hotels and bungalow colonies filled with New York City families every summer. When the resorts closed, the town did not merely decline, it hollowed out almost entirely. Main Street went dark, storefronts sat empty for years, the school district shrank. Beginning in the early 2000s, Hasidic and Orthodox Jewish families began moving to South Fallsburg year-round. They were drawn by low property prices, open space, and the existing physical infrastructure left behind by the resort era. Former hotels were converted into yeshivas. Bungalow colonies were renovated into permanent housing. New kosher shops and bakeries opened on streets that had been shuttered for a decade. The Fallsburg Central School District saw significant enrollment growth driven by Orthodox family settlement. New private religious schools opened alongside the public system. Property values in South Fallsburg rose substantially between 2010 and 2023. What had been one of the most affordable towns in the lower Hudson Valley became a place where houses sold quickly and new construction could not keep pace with demand. This is no longer a seasonal town. The lights stay on through the winter, the schools are full in January, the grocery stores are stocked 12 months a year. South Fallsburg did not just recover, it became a permanent community. A seasonal ghost town transformed into a year-round community is a powerful story, but head south to the Jersey Shore and you will find a township whose growth defies everything demographers thought they knew about American population trends. Number 2, Lakewood Township, New Jersey, Ocean County, about 70 miles south of Manhattan. As of the 2020 census, the population stood at 135,158. That was an increase of 45.6% from 2010, which itself had jumped 53.8% from the year 2000. The population doubled in 20 years. It all began in the 1940s when Rabbi Aharon Kotler arrived in America. He had fled the destruction of the great yeshivas of Eastern Europe during the Holocaust and resolved to rebuild what had been lost. In 1943, he established Beth Medrash Govoha in Lakewood, a yeshiva and kollel, meaning a center of advanced religious study. By 2016, Beth Medrash Govoha had grown to serve approximately 6,500 full-time students across 74 affiliated yeshivas. With part-time learners included, the number reaches roughly 25,000. It is one of the largest centers of Jewish learning on the face of the earth. By 2018, roughly 2/3 of Lakewood's residents were Orthodox Jews, around 90,000 people. Lakewood is now the 5th largest city in New Jersey. If growth continues at this rate, it could become the 3rd largest by 2030. The birth rate is among the highest in the world for any municipality. Route 9, the commercial spine of the township, is flanked by yeshivas, wedding halls, kosher supermarkets, and religious bookshops for miles. On a Friday afternoon, the roads fill with families hurrying home before sundown. By sunset, the township falls quiet. Rabbi Kotler's grandson has described his grandfather as a revolutionary, a man who believed that traditional Judaism could thrive in America, completely countercultural. The extraordinary growth has created real pressure on infrastructure and neighboring communities. These tensions deserve acknowledgement. But what has been built here defies comparison. From a single yeshiva in the 1940s to a city of 135,000, it has no parallel in modern demographics anywhere. A township that doubled its population in 20 years is a phenomenon without equal. But our final destination surpasses even Lakewood. It is a place where over 93% of the population is Hasidic Jewish, where Yiddish is nearly the only language spoken, where the median age of residents is just over 11 years old, and where the community was founded by a man who survived the Holocaust and resolved to build a world entirely apart. Number 1. Kiryas Joel, Orange County, New York, about 55 miles north of New York City. The village sits in a wooded valley surrounded by hills and farmland. There was almost nothing here before the community arrived. Kiryas Joel was founded in the 1970s by Grand Rebbe Joel Teitelbaum and a group of followers from the Satmar Hasidic movement. Teitelbaum was born in 1887 in Sighetu Marmatie, Romania. He survived the Holocaust through the Kastner transport and eventually reached the United States in 1946. He settled in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and spent decades rebuilding the Satmar community from the ashes of European Jewry. But Williamsburg was crowded. Space was running out. Teitelbaum and his followers chose this remote, wooded location in Orange County to build a self-reliant community guided entirely by traditional religious values. The village started with roughly 500 people in 1977. By the 2020 census, The population had reached 32,954. The 2023 estimate pushed that figure to approximately 42,000. That represents a 60% surge between 2010 and 2020 alone. The growth shows no sign of slowing. Over 93% of residents speak a language other than English at home. That language is overwhelmingly Yiddish. Only 6.3% reported speaking English exclusively. The vast majority belong to the Satmar Hasidic sect. The movement traces its roots to the city of Satu Mare in Romania. It emerged from the Hungarian-speaking Jewish world that was devastated during the Holocaust. Curious Joel has the youngest median age of any municipality in the entire United States, just 11.4 years old. More than half the residents are under 18. The streets are filled with children. Walk through the village on any weekday and you will see them everywhere, in schoolyards, on pavements, holding hands in long lines crossing the road under the watch of their teachers. 500 people arrived in the 1970s. Today, there are over 42,000. Yiddish, the language that was meant to die in the camps of Europe, is the first language of nearly every child born here. The streets are filled with the sound of children, more children per square mile than anywhere else in the United States.